Thank you, John. Carrying on from yesterday, I have been asked so many times about how exactly our family connections are to Eruch and also to Baba. Now, our family is not related to Baba in any way except that he adopted it for his own and became the sixth or seventh brother, however many brothers there were in the Satha family. But Eruch and Merwan, who for all intents and purposes are my uncles, because that's how we grew up in the same family, are not actually my uncles. Baba arranged my parents' marriage, as I said yesterday. What is important to know is that my parents were first cousins to each other, direct first cousins, in that my mother's father and my father's mother were brother and sister, and Eruch's mother, Gaimai, was their sister. So all of these three were siblings, and the children, Eruch, Merwan, Manu, Meru, and my parents were first cousins. So when Baba married my parents, my mother's family had a history of muscular dystrophy. There's actually a very nice picture just outside the door of my mother's sister Dhan with all the lady Mandli. And it was a great concern for the family when Baba said these two should get married, about what would happen with the children. Would the children be affected by this disease? So my grandfather and grandmother, the respective parents of my mom and dad, went to Baba and said, Baba, what should we do? You know, we have this history of muscular dystrophy on Roshan's side. And if they have children, it could be that they get muscular dystrophy too later on in life. And Baba said, I am arranging the marriage. If I arrange the marriage, then I can tell you this, that not just their children, but 7 generations after that don't have to worry about having any kind of, problem with genetics. And I think Meenu asked me, he said, so Baba was a geneticist? I said, no, he was the avatar. So with his divine authority as the avatar, he could say 7 generations will not have any problem. And I was just saying, maybe there may not be 7 generations. He was playing it safe by saying 7 generations. Because I only have one son, and unless he goes into production pretty quickly, we are not going to have any generations to follow. But Eruch and Merwan are my second or third cousins, I'm not quite sure. But somebody said to Eruch, you keep saying she's your niece, and she's not. She's your second cousin. And he said, brother, she's my niece. I tell you she's my niece. You keep your knowledge to yourself. So that's how we are related. I hope it makes it clearer to some of you, because you all were wondering how the family was connected to the Jessawalas. So the Kerawalas and Jessawalas actually stayed in the same place, that's Bindra House, for a long, long time, because my father was at sea and my grandmother, Banumasi, who had lost her husband very early on, she didn't have much money. So Beramsa Papa said, why don't you all stay there? And when I was born, Beramsa Papa thought I was his daughter Meru. Somebody asked me about whether I knew more about my last life than I was saying. Was it you, David? You asked me that. You asked me that. Right. So when I was born, Papa would go to Baba and say, Baba, she's my Meru, come back, isn't she? And Baba would say to him, no, she's not your Meru, come back. And he persisted. No matter how many times Baba said, no, she's not your Meru, he would go and say to him, hoping he'd change his mind, Baba, she's my Meru, come back, isn't she? And Baba would say no. So Baba's Mehera said to Baba, Baba, he's an old man. Why don't you just say, yes, she's your Meru, come back and have done with it? And he looks at Mehera and says, this is my Gai Mama was telling me. He said to Mehera, he said, I am the avatar. Should I lie to him? Should I tell him a lie just to make him feel better? She's not his Meru. So then Mehera got some bee in her bonnet and she pestered Baba. She said, no, if she's not his Meru, then who is she? You tell me who she is. Because you said she was close to you in her last life. You brought her back very quickly. So you tell me who she is. So, and Baba would say, don't ask me this question. She persisted, just like Papa persisted in saying, she's my Meru, come back, isn't she? Mehera persisted in saying, you tell me who she is. So finally, to please Mehera, because Baba never did anything to displease Mehera, he did tell her who I was. And he told her that I was Jal Kerawalla. Now, this is why she said that she still carries forward the arrogance from her last life, because Jal Kerawalla was a very senior civil servant under the British. And he was not arrogant. He was a very shy, retiring man, just like I am in this Advent. He really was. He was. I mean, I'm teasing about me, but he was very shy, retiring. And he came across as arrogant because he was used to commanding a lot of people. He could get a road built for Baba to go into seclusion in the mountains because he had that kind of authority and that kind of stature. So, because of his way of being, she thought he was arrogant. And so whenever I would be bossy or something, she would say to Gai Mama, she'd say, she's not lost the habit from her last life, she's just the same. Of course, years later, I heard, and this is very good, I heard that Baba also said that Mehernath, which is Bhauji's son, was also Jal Kerawalla. So now we have a split soul, We have a split soul, and I have the brattiness and he has the well-behaved personality that people expect of somebody who's come back to be with Baba. But Baba did say apparently that she was I worked her so hard in her last life that I brought her back to play with her, which he did. He played with me. He would play with my toys. He would play with them before I could play with them. Yes, it was difficult getting my toys back from Baba. There was a little doll that my father had brought from somewhere. She was called Mary doll. And she had a hole in her mouth and a hole down below. And Baba loved to sit with a dropper and put water in her mouth and hold a basin underneath and make her pee. Now, Mehera was extremely fastidious about all things to do with hair, nails, excreta. She didn't like it. But he would call her and say, Mehera, come, let's play with this doll. And she would say, no, Baba, thank you. He would say, no, come sit. Bring the gindi. Gindi is a little bowl. Bring the gindi. I'll put the water and you hold the gindi below her. And then, And he really, really enjoyed Mary doll. And there was another toy I had that my dad brought from one of his voyages. It was a dog which pulled a cart. It was an airport porter. And it had a cart full of bags. You put the batteries in and the dog would walk. And then it would lean back against the cart and pant. Then it would walk again. And Baba loved letting that dog go backwards and forwards until he would stop suddenly and say, poor thing is so tired, turn it off. And then after half an hour or so, he said, put it back on. So he had, this is the side that he showed us in this lifetime. Now Merwan, Eruch's brother, was extremely protected by Baba all through his life. For many, many years, Baba would not let him go anywhere near women. Though he was the only child who lived in the women's ashram until he was 12 years old, he was not allowed to touch any woman, not even his mother, for many, many years. Baba had given him an order. But when I was born, Baba took me from my mother's arms and put me in his arms and said, you can touch her, you can play with her, and you can now also touch your mother. So for many years, that were the only two people, the women whom he could touch. And that's why Meherwan and I have such a strong bond, because he's been the father that I knew. He was there when I was growing up. My father was away on the ship and came back once for 6 months every 3 years. So for 3 years, we didn't see him. Then he'd come back for 6 months, and it was like having a visitor who brought you lots of presents. But he wasn't really my father. He was not involved in doing my homework with me or telling me I shouldn't do this or shouldn't do that, or introducing me to reading books that he would bring for me. The first books I ever read as a child were the Homer and the Iliad in an abridged form, because Meherwan thought that's what is good. The child will enjoy that. And I did enjoy it. I enjoyed it very much. And my love of reading stayed with me ever since. So that was why, and that is why, Meherwan and I are so close. Now, after Dolly was born, Baba told my father that there should be no more children. And this upset my grandmother because, she wanted an heir to the Kerawalla name. She said, Baba, only 2 girls? What about a boy child? He said, no, only 2 girls. These are the only 2 children I want them to have. He told my dad, he said, before you go to the ship, you go and have a vasectomy. Because he wanted to make sure no more children were born. And Baba was very practical. As I said, you don't have to rely on self-control, go have a vasectomy. Don't worry about it after that. So when that happened, and my Banu Mama, Gai Mama, they all thought, well, maybe they should have a 3rd child. And Baba said, no, these two girls will do more work for me than any man ever will. Now, that was the first of what I think is like a minor white lie on Baba's part. Because while he's given my sister very hardworking genes, extremely hardworking genes, she works all the time, she still does other things. She's been told, come work in the trust, and she says, no, 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 no. And I, who don't have a hardworking bone in my body, was thrown into doing all of this cooking and stuff. But cooking is not really Baba's work unless you think, oh, well, if I'm feeding his lovers, then that is cooking. I was feeding his mandali, which I suppose counts as Baba's work. But, I'm still waiting for him to show me what is this very important work that I am supposed to do for him, when I'm supposed to do it. There was another small fib that he told many years later, and I will tell you about that as we go along. Adrienne sang a song yesterday, and before she sang it, she talked about it being lonely at the top because you go through, the spiritual path and you keep trying to improve yourself, and it becomes harder and harder as you go higher and higher because things are always trying to pull you down. Now, what I have experienced is that Baba doesn't really want perfection. If he wanted perfection, he would have made us all perfect. However, he would use any means at his disposal. He would use bribery, he would use threats, anything to get you to do what he wanted. When I was about 2.5 years old, we were sitting in Guru Prasad around him, and he called me. He said, come here, can you say my prayers to me? And at that point, I could say some of the prayers, but not all of it. And I mixed up the repentance and the Parvardigar prayer. And I said to him, Baba, I know some things, but not everything. He said, don't worry, say what you know. I said, no, no, no. He said, see these sweets on the side? And he had this whole pile of mango sweets with like a juicy, soft mango center in there. He said, if you say the prayers, I will give you not one or two, I'll give you all these sweets. All of them. And they were such a favorite of mine. I said, okay. So I muddled my way through the prayers. He said, don't worry, I'll help you to learn the prayers also. Don't worry. Just say the prayers as you know them. I'll give you the sweets. So he bribed me to say the prayers. Right. But he is not so straightforward as to say, all right, I've given you the sweets, you enjoy them. He said, don't eat them now. Take them home and eat them there. So he told Mani, bring a brown paper bag, we'll put the sweets inside and she can take them back with her. And so I take them back to Bindra house where we were staying, and Gai Mama says, now Mehera, you've got so many sweets, give one to everybody. Now if you remember, I was born like that. So I said, no, they are my sweets, I'm not sharing them with anyone. She said, so many sweets, you'll eat them by yourself? I said, yes. So she said, all right. So I take the sweets and I put them by Baba's photograph, and thinking I'll eat them tomorrow morning. And I went to sleep. Now in the night, our servant Kesar, who had a habit of stealing things, she took those sweets and she ate every single one of them. She did. She literally, the morning, all that was left was a brown paper bag and the wrappers from my sweets. There was nothing left. But very shortly after that, I could say the prayers fluently. And after that, every time Baba would say the prayers in front of me. So I would say the prayers in front of him. And then the Pune Center, the old Pune Center, which was in, I think, Patil's house, I used to do that every Monday there as well. But that is all I could do in front of Baba. I wasn't actually a performer. I didn't sing, I didn't dance. And you remember I said there were the two couples that Baba said, the rule for abstinence does not apply to you. That was Mr. and Mrs. Thade and my parents. Now, they too had a daughter called Alka. She was born approximately the same time as I was. And she danced. They would dress her up in this nice fancy costume and she would come and dance in front of Baba. And I absolutely hated Alka. I absolutely hated her because, she was doing this glamorous thing. She was singing, she was dancing in front of Baba. And all I did was say the prayers. That's so boring, saying the prayers in front of Baba. She's dancing in front of him. And Baba knew that I was extremely jealous of her. So he would ask me to come and sit by his side here. While she was dancing, he would say, you come sit over here. So that A, I could see her, but B, while she was dancing all the time, he was going like that with his hand so that I didn't have an outburst, which he also knew I could do. So he didn't mind jealousy, he didn't mind greed, because otherwise I wouldn't have learned how to say the prayers. It was sheer greed that got me into that one. And he didn't mind telling a fib or two. Baba's niece Mehnaz and I are 1 year apart. She's Gulnar Sukharwala's daughter, and we were both, right from the beginning, quite chubby children. She was chubby, I was chubby. And one morning the families were sitting in front of Baba and Guru Prasad and just talking, and Mehnaz started crying a little. She was only 1.5 years or something, a very little child. And so Parinmai, to keep her quiet, started unwrapping a sweet. And Baba looked at Parinmai and said, "What are you doing?" He said, "She's crying, Baba, I'll give her a sweet." He said, "No, she's fat. No sugar for her." So my grandmother, who couldn't keep her mouth shut, says to Baba, "Baba, Mehera is also like that. Should we also stop her sugar?" And he said, "No, not her sugar." One day, and apparently he held up his finger and said, "She'll be like this." And I'm waiting. 55 years I have waited to become like this, and no such thing, nothing. So I just wonder, like that. Chris, he probably meant it about you, not me. He just mixed it up. But I have waited so long and thinking, it should happen naturally. He lifted up his finger and said, "She'll be like this." But, okay, he might need a little help. Diet, exercise, this, that. No. So I always wonder, does the avatar always tell the truth? Or does he just say it to make people feel better later on? So Baba didn't mind bribery. He didn't mind the occasional corruption. He didn't mind jealousy. He didn't mind greed. And sorry? No, greed. Wheat. No, he didn't mind wheat. He had chapatis from time to time. He didn't mind wheat. Yeah, he ate wheat. So, he didn't want us to be perfect. And he didn't mind laziness either. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. In fact, when I was around 6 and we were in Guru Prasad, he suddenly turned to me and he said, "Mehera, what do you want to be when you grow up?" And I said, "Baba, I want to be a doctor." And he looked at me and he smiled and said, "We'll see. We'll see." Because becoming a doctor takes so much hard work for years and years and years. You have to work hard. And he probably knew she'll never stick that course out. So he said, "We'll see." So, okay, good. He gave me a love of people and I became a psychologist, which is much better. In fact, it's so much better that Eruch, my uncle, who when I was working in Pune and doing like workshops and things, would love to say, he would say, "How much did you charge them for this?" And I would say, whatever, 15,000 for the workshop or whatever. And he would say, "They must be idiots to pay you that kind of money for just going and talking to them." He was so entertained by this. He was really, really, really entertained. So now, Baba didn't mind all of those things. He also didn't mind smutty jokes. Because in 1967, right after we had come back from traveling with my father on the ship, we were called to to Guru Prasad for tea. And just that morning, there had been an issue of the Illustrated Weekly which came to our house. And they had a book, they had a page of jokes in there. And most of the jokes were rather innocuous, and there was one slightly smutty one. And Nargish Dadachandji and I were reading this together, and we both sort of laughed over the smutty one. Then we go in the afternoon around 4 o'clock. We are sitting on the veranda, and Baba suddenly turns to me and says, "Tell me a joke." And all those nice, innocuous jokes just went straight out of my head, and the only one I could remember was the smutty one. So I said, "Baba, it's not a decent joke." Because in India, if something is not sort of kosher, you say it's a bit indecent. "It's not a decent joke, Baba." He said, "It doesn't matter, you tell it to me." So I had to tell him the joke. And he chuckled, but all the other ladies just sort of looked like, at this age she's telling jokes like that? So he didn't mind stuff like that. In fact, he encouraged some people to tell him smutty jokes from time to time just to lighten the avataric load on people. Yes. Now, the other creature or soul that I was extremely jealous of was Baba's dog Mastan. And this is because whenever we went to Meherazad and had lunch with Baba, Baba would eat most of the food, but he would keep all the choice pieces on his plate for Mastan. He would put all the pieces of meat or whatever it was in a circle around the rim of his plate. After lunch, we would go into his bedroom and sit down, and Mehera would spread a sheet on Baba's bed. And then she would release Mastan, who would come straight in, jump on the bed, sit next to Baba. Baba would fondle him, stroke him, play with him, and then give him all this food that he had saved from his lunch. And I absolutely didn't think that was appropriate. In fact, well, if I was sitting there, why did he have to play with the dog? You know, he could play with me. And one afternoon, it got to such a pitch that I was sitting on Gai Mama's lap, and I began pinching her first. I would pinch her, pinch. And she said, don't do that. I continued to pinch her, and she continued to push my hand. And finally, it got to the point where I burst out crying, loudly, howling. And everybody said, Mehera, behave yourself. But Baba didn't say that. He gestured, Mani was interpreting, he said, you don't like Mastan being here? I said, no, Baba, don't want him here. He said, okay, Mehera, take Mastan away. And she took him away. And Baba said, you come and sit over here. So, you know, he indulges everybody. He indulges everybody, especially small children. And I was very fortunate that I was part of his indulgence. This was all very wonderful, and you know, we continued thinking Baba is always, always, always going to be there. And of course, come January 1969, we got the news. We had just come back from school, and Meherwan came cycling up to the house, and he told Dolly and I, said, you'll both go stand outside while I talk to your mother. He closed the door. And Dolly Bastani was there as well. She happened to be there. And he told them, and then he came out and told us, Baba's dropped his body, we have to go. So we couldn't believe it. Being children, you know, Baba's dropped his body. Nobody in the family had died so far. So it was quite a shock for us. And we went to Meherabad in different ways. My Gai Mama and all went with Merji, and we went with Minu Bharucha in his car to Meherabad. It was a blue moon that night. It was a full moon, the second in the month. And that was fortunate because his car didn't have any working headlights. All they had was 2 battery-operated torches, very dim ones, which his wife held out of the window as we went. Well, we got there, and we went up the hill. It was early in the morning. We went up the hill, and we went into the tomb shrine to bow down to Baba's body, which was already there. And at that point, I realized what all these people had been talking about. Baba is God, Baba is God. So far, it was just something I accepted, because my parents said that, everybody I knew said Baba is God. I walked into the Samadhi, and it was like he had gone nowhere. You could feel him so strongly in the tomb that for my almost 10-year-old mind, it was a miracle. I thought, that's what they mean. That is what they mean when they say he's God. Only God could be lying in front of me, what is left of his body, but still feel like he's everywhere. And I tell you, those 7 days, I just went around beaming because I'd finally got it. I understood what they'd been talking about. And it was then that I started thinking, well, maybe I should try and be a better person, because Baba is God. He's given me all of these gifts as a child, you know, probably most undeserving, but he gave them to me. Who am I to question that he's given me the gifts? But it didn't work for very long. I was still lazy, but there would come periods when I would sit back and reflect and think, I shouldn't have done that. And try not to do it again. No, I'm good like that. I try not to make the same mistakes over and over again. But then, you know, went off, did my education, went to college, got a job. So no more Baba work was happening as far as I was concerned. I was just living life, having a good time. And then around sort of 83, 84, when I was working for an adoption agency, I suddenly desperately, desperately wanted to have a baby. Really wanted to have a baby. And so I tried to adopt one, and I brought this lovely baby boy home, and Eruch was in the house, and the baby and Eruch immediately bonded. And because as a single woman I couldn't adopt the child, I was trying to convince my mom and dad to adopt him for me so that I could bring him up. And they were quite happy to do so. You know, the child just fit right into the household. But Eruch said no. He said, no. What happens if you die suddenly? Then your parents are left bringing up a child in their aging years. It's not fair on them. He said, you want a child, you go out and have your own. So, you know, so I said to them, all right. I did try and ask him if it would be all right to just have a child and not get married. And he said, are you mad? What are you thinking about? So I had to get married. So I said to them, I said, find me a boy and I'll get married. Yeah. Because I was going out with two guys at the time, and I, didn't think either of them was good marriage material. One of them would have been a child before I had one of my own. He was, he would have needed so much looking after. No, Pris, don't tap him like that. Don't do that. Yeah. And the other one, he was a nice enough guy, but he was a Brahmin, South Indian Brahmin, and his family was very orthodox. And they would never have stood for somebody like me being in the family. So anyway, so my family asked around the Baba community, and Adi and Rhoda Dubash said, what about Sahavas Arjani, Dolly and Adi Arjani's son? He's met Baba, they come from Baba family, da-da-da-da-da. And it all seemed to slot in quite nicely. And so that's how I ended up getting married to Sahavas Arjani. And of course, as Baba works, the first thing that happened was I got pregnant, and just over 9 months later, my son was born. And I tell you, he's worth everything that happened afterwards. He is such a wonderful gift from Baba. But that's when my spiritual training began. Getting married was my spiritual training. Baba said marriage is good for people who are on the path. They go along the path together. And I said that to Karina the other day. I said a good marriage is a wonderful tool to travel along the spiritual path, but a bad marriage is even better. It is true.
Wonderful progress.
She has a wonderful marriage. She's this close to God realization. Yes, yeah. You have to. No, I think I would have thanked him. From time to time, I would have said, thank you, Baba, such a nice man. But when it's not such a nice man, you think about Baba constantly. And yes, and then you realize that the reason why you're so unhappy is not because life is making you unhappy. You expect so much from this one person. You expect them to be everything, and they can't do that. You expect them to be like you, and they can't do that. You expect their Baba to be the same as your Baba, and it is not the case. He had grown up with Baba, and I had grown up with Baba. And one day he turned to me and he said, I don't know why Baba said you were so special. He said, you are not even a good Baba lover. And I said to him, that's because your Baba and my Baba are two different things. My Baba loved me, played with me, encouraged me to be who I am. Your Baba is very judgmental and harsh, and he's always angry. And I said to him, Kavas, they say God made us in his image. I said, that's not right. We make God in our own image. Every single one of us makes God in our own image. And so your God and my God is different. And that's why I am a good Baba lover to my Baba, and you're a good Baba lover to your Baba. And we will agree to disagree on this. So, this was my spiritual training. People would say to me, Baba said he would take care of you, and look at how he's taking care of you. And I said to them, you don't understand. He is taking more care of me now than he ever did when I was a child or when I was a young adult, this is taking care, because I could see that he was with me all the time. I could talk to him, I could discuss things with him. I didn't need anybody else at that point in time. Of course, I had my family who were writing and phoning and everything, so it's not fair to say that I didn't discuss it with anybody else. But eventually, when I came back to India, all of this spiritual training in my marriage came to such good use, because after we'd separated and everything, I was called to be in Meherabad to take over cooking for Katie, who was writing her book at the time, the cookbook, and also she was not very well. So I was told, I was working for the British Civil Service at the time, and I was eligible for a 5-year career break. So they said to me, would you consider coming to cook in Meherabad? And I said, no, this was not then. No, this is not then. I came back for 5 years, and my ex-husband also came back with me thinking it'll work better if you're in India. But it didn't work better because, you bring everything with you. You don't leave anything behind. So ultimately, he went back to England. And 2 years later, my son, who didn't like the education system in India, decided he wanted to go and live with his dad and went back as well. So there I was working, I was free. And about the time that we were having all these arguments, I had said to Eruch, I said, Eruch, Mama, can I come and work with you? And at that point, he said, no, I don't need you here with me. So now I have this lovely life. I have a nice apartment. I have lots of work to do. I have loads of friends, good social life. And so I go back to Nagar, and I'm sitting with him at the trust office having tea one day. And he turned to me and he said, if I asked you to come and work with me, would you come? I said, if you ask me to come and work with you, yes, I'll come. This was in August of 1997. So he said to me, okay, give me a date. I said, right. Oh, how about your birthday? He said, okay, you come on Duni Day before my birthday, but don't just come with one backpack. I want you to bring everything. Close your flat, give up your tenancy, come to Meherabad to stay with my mom and dad, who had a house there. So I said, okay. And then I came, I settled into Meherabad, got involved in things like Samadhi Duty Organization and Savage's Kitchen. But also during the week, I would cycle from Meherabad to the trust office Monday to Thursday. Wednesday, because when Thursday, Eruch didn't come to the office. And work with him. And then Wednesday evening, I'd go to Meherabad and be there, and then come back again with him on Monday and start the cycle over again. So one day at tea time, I turned to him and I said, listen, when I asked you 2 years ago, you said to me, I don't need you here. And now, just when everything was going well, I was having a good time, you tell me, come and work here. I said, why did you do that? Why didn't you let me come 2 years ago? And I think this is important for anybody who wants to do voluntary work for Baba. What Eruch said to me was so important. He said, 2 years ago, you had nothing to offer Baba. You were coming to take from him. He said, if you come to take from Baba, then you will never be happy working here. He said, now you have a lot to give up. You're giving up something. You're giving to Baba rather than taking from him. This is the best time to come. So the best time to come and do Baba's work is when you are really having a good time, give it all up, and go and suffer in Meherabad or Meherabad. That's when you go and work for Baba. Yes, otherwise, what are you getting? You're just coming over there, bringing all your problems with you. And you have no fun, he has no fun. And I think Baba would like us to have some fun. And it was really, I was so fortunate that before she died, Mani had told me that I could always, if I felt there was nowhere else for me to go, she said, you always have a home in Meherabad, which is why I can actually stay there, and which is why I stay there now. Because even if my family had been there, had Mani not given me the permission, I couldn't have been working and staying in Meherabad. I would have had to work from Meherabad. But she said, you can always be here. This considered that you always have a home in Meherabad. And the other thing that Mani said to me, which I'm sure a lot of you will find very appropriate, is when I was going through the worst of my marriage and I had come with my son to Meherabad one day, she said, come, let's go and get some toys for the children. Now, I said, sure. What I didn't realize was she wanted a few minutes alone with me. And she said to me, you don't look like your usual self. You're unhappy, you look unhappy, you pull down, you have no color. She said, what's the matter? And, I said, you know about my problems with my husband. She said, I know all of that, but I want you to remember this. Baba was so particular about your happiness that he gave your family an order saying she should never be punished. She should never be hurt or upset. You'll be hurting me. So she said, don't worry, be happy is not a feel-good statement. She said, it's not a feel-good statement. It's an order, and it is Baba's most important order. Yes, I'm so glad somebody else was told this too. She said, it's Baba's most important order. And she said, you owe it to Baba, if not to yourself, to obey that order. And if anything or anyone stands in the way of your obeying that order, then you owe it to Baba to get rid of that person or thing. She was so direct. And she did not mean physically get rid of that person or thing. She meant in our hearts, let go of them, give them up. And yet it took me another 3 or 4 years before I could actually do that and say enough is enough. But I've always remembered that. We owe it to Baba, if not to ourselves, to obey that order. And if anyone or anything stands in the way of our doing that, then we owe it to him to give up that person or thing. So many of us carry around old relationships which we churn up every so often and makes us really unhappy. We don't let go of them. We don't finish with them. We wallow in the past or obsess about the future. But that's not worrying and being happy. We have to not worry and be happy with all of our hearts and souls. And Pris, you know all about that. I can see that. That's a good marriage. Spiritual path progress happening before us as we speak. She is?
No, you are.
I am. Yes, I am. Yes. So now by this time, most of my time was spent looking after Eruch, making sure that he had enough help with his work. Davana was always there, but he didn't like her cooking quite as much. She would give him all this salt-free, oil-free, this free, that free food. And so I was cooking for Meherazad, and I had to also cook for Eruch. She cooked, I cooked. He would often eat a mixture of both. And sometimes he would say, give me your food fast before she comes so that I can eat it before she sees it. But, and keeping him fed and happy through the last years of his life, that was really, really a privilege for me. Because Eruch's surrenderance was so total, so complete, that he never complained. Occasionally he would shout at either me or Davana, but he never complained. He only shouted at us briefly, and then it was done. He did that because there was nothing else he could do. Once he said to me, he said, Baba's taken everything from me. The only thing I had was my taste, my tongue. I've always loved my food. And now towards the end of my life, he's even taken that away from me. And he said, Mehera, don't grow old. I beg you, don't grow old. He said, it's the most horrible thing in the world to grow old. So I said to him, when you go to Baba, you tell him that I've asked her not to grow old. Please make sure she doesn't. I said, because it's not in my hands. But he took everything that Baba piled on him, and he suffered through it. And I asked him once, I said, Eruch Mama, is there anything you worry about dying? And he said, actually there is. He said, all my life I have lived with so much dignity. I have looked after other people, never needed people to look after me. He said, my biggest fear is when I die, my bowels will release and my bladder will go. I don't want that to happen. And the night he was dying, that was the day that Bhauji had come back from the West, and he went to the trust office. He went to see Bhauji, and he came home, and he said goodbye to everybody. He came into the room, to Manu and Merwan's room, and he hugged them and said, you have been the best brother and sister anybody could have ever wanted. He said, thank you. And to the servant who had done all his, potty and everything, he said to her, Kesar, you have looked after me so well. Next life you will be Queen of Nepal. He said, thank you. And then I went and sat with him. I said, why are you doing this today? He said, well, the astrologer had told them when I was born that I would not live to see my 85th year. He said, what do you think? I said, well, you're nearly 85. You know, he could have been wrong. He said, I don't think so. And my uncle, who had never until then wanted to send an email to anybody in his life, he did all his correspondence by hand. He said to me, can you send an email for me? I said, yeah. Who do you want to send it to? He said, I want to send an email to Craig. He's in America. So I said, sure, tell me what you want written. And he said, write to him. And he said this in Gujarati. He said, tell him I went to the office today, and without him the office was sunu sunu, which means lifeless, quiet, you know, too quiet. I said, okay, I'll go and send off the email. So I went off to the room where we only had one computer in those days and one email. So I sent off the email to Craig, and I came back, and he said to me, he said, did you send it? I said, yeah. He said, good. And that night, at 2 o'clock in the morning, the watchman came to say he's not feeling well. He's on the potty, having a motion. So we went in, and he said, I feel breathless. I'm not feeling really well. So we called Shelley, called Goher. So he had passed the bowel. He had his, emptied his bladder, and we let him sit up. Then finally he had to go lie down. And I called my mother and father and my son, who was there at the time. I said, Eruch is dying, so you come. And Goher heard me saying that, and she said, no, he's not dying. He will recover. So tell them not to come. So she told me, tell them not to come. So I told them not to come. But he was dying. He was dying. And I was with him when he died. I was massaging his feet. And you could see his eyes went blank, but he looked at Baba's picture till the end. And when he died, nothing came out. Not a speck of any kind of fluid or excreta came out of Eruch. Nothing. So, because Baba had heard what he had to say, and he let him keep his dignity right till the end, that was Eruch. But he was happy to go. You could feel that, when people die, sometimes there's this atmosphere of holding on. You can feel that they're still there with you. With Eruch, nothing. The moment he stopped breathing, he was gone. There was nothing left. In fact, he stopped breathing long after he had gone, because he was with Baba at least 5-7 minutes before he died. And, Shelley was on the phone to Bob Aarons. What should we do? Should we give him an adrenaline injection in the heart? It was too late. They would have done it, but it was too late. He was gone. And it was the same with his sister when she died. She went to Baba just the same, with no regrets. Everything was finished, served Baba beginning to end, time to go. So that was, being with the Mandli gives you experiences like this, which are so, so sublime. You're never the same after that. Everything changes. Of course, everything changes probably inside. Outside, I'm still pretty lazy. And I can still be a brat when the occasion arises. But Mani said, don't worry, be happy, so you try. You try not to worry about anything. You give it all to Baba. In fact, my friend Miriam in Spain and I have a club. And so far there were only 2 members in it, but I think somebody else volunteered to be in the club as well. It's called the Baba Ko De Do Club. That means, Baba Ko De Do in Hindi means give it to Baba. So if you give it to Baba, then you don't worry and you're quite happy. So every time she or I has a problem, somebody pisses us off or whatever, we email each other, and whoever's the one who's upset will write to the other one, and she'll say, Baba Ko De Do, remember Baba Ko De Do. So it's good. It's a club that any of you can form. You can't join ours because ours is very exclusive. We only have 2 people in it. But you can form your own club. I think it helps to have somebody who is the same as you, who can then support you and say, remember what we decided, we were not going to do this. We are not going to do this. And we gave it to Baba. And Baba takes it and transforms it and gives it back to you in a way that you can actually work with and tolerate. And sometimes he gives the other person a kick in their backside, which is fantastic. It's always good when somebody else gets a kick in their backside. And I think, yes, you did that to me. See what Baba did to you? So, this is my life with Meher Baba. I'm sure most of you... Oh, I must tell you the story about the romance. Laurie Bloom, who has a tongue that sometimes runs away with her, she was asked... Adi instructed her and Richie Bloom to get married. And she said to me, I want to go for a walk on the hill. Will you come with me for a walk on the hill? I said, of course I will. So we go for a walk on the hill, and she starts off first. She says, you've been with Baba and the monthly and everything. If a monthly member asked you to get married to somebody, would you do it? I said, no. If Baba asked me to marry somebody, I'd do it. But if a monthly member asked me to do it, I would think about it. She said, you're so fortunate, you have had Baba from the beginning and so on and so forth, and we had to go searching for him, and you're so fortunate to have this conviction. I said, excuse me. I said, you know what? You are so fortunate. You have had the romance of coming to Baba. You didn't have him. You searched for him. You found him. You fell in love with him. And there you have it. You had a romance. I said, we had arranged marriages. We were his from the beginning. We didn't have a choice. We didn't have to search. We didn't have to obsess about finding God. We were told he is God. We accepted. And so what she does, horrible woman, she goes and tells my uncle Eruch. She said, your niece said Baba took away the romance in her life. Yes, she didn't tell him the rest of it. She just told him that your niece said Baba took away the romance in her life. I was not very old at that time. I must have been 16 or 17. And teenagers, even somebody who was obviously as shy and retiring as I was, don't like to be made the center of attention. But a few days later in Mandli Hall, in those days we used to stay till 6 o'clock. So after tea, Eruch went into the hall and Dolly and I came in a little bit afterwards. And he says, there's my niece Mehera. She's the one who said Baba took away the romance in her life. Please, at that point in time, your ego is pretty fragile at 16 or 17. You don't want your uncle making such silly announcements in public. So I said to him, don't say that, that's not what I said. He said, all right, tell them what you said. So then I had to go through the whole palaver about what I had said to Laurie Bloom and what, and he said, oh, now I understand. That's okay. But he said, I didn't want you to feel that Baba had taken away the romance from your life. You're always free to go out and have a romance. But strangely enough, even as a teenager, I never had a crush on anybody. And my friends would have all these enormous crushes on boys and things, and I would think, what do you see in that person? But I realized why it was like that. I had Eruch, and I had Merwan, and of course I had Baba, and all the other men, Mandli. And they are a pretty formidable group of men. It's very difficult to find somebody who can match them, approximately, or not at all. But, women are essential in life and so are men. I don't say that we are the fairer sex or that they are the better halves. I think we're all very essential overall. And I'm a big fan of men. They have uses. They carry bags, except that's right. And if you're my height, yes, you definitely need a tall man to do stuff. My son is 6'2". He can do quite a lot of things for me that I can't do for myself. But when you have Baba, sometimes that is enough. And I think my time is over. Is it? I do. Okay, then I think what we need to do is... Sorry, darling? 25 more minutes. I think, yes.
What happened to the young baby boy?
He got adopted. I went and did the home study and everything, and he got adopted into a nice family. Yes?
I'm curious what happened to your ex. Oh, you divorced?
Oh, yes. Good question. He remarried a really wonderful lady. She's very sweet. She used to be his ward nurse. My ex is a doctor. And she was used to obeying him, because she was his ward nurse. She didn't question everything he said. And she was tall and thin and blonde. So they're very happy. I like her very much. But she has been forbidden from speaking to me because I might pollute her mind. No, they didn't have. She has 2 children, 2 daughters from her previous marriage, who are my son's stepsisters, and he loves them, and their children are his beloved nieces and nephews. My son would actually like to have 3 daughters at some point, but he's not made a start yet. He's only 28, so he's got time. And his girlfriend is 25, so she has time. Biological clocks are sort of not ticking too fast at the moment. But does anybody else want to ask me things? Yes?
Did you have a connection with Mani? You seem like you would.
Yes, she was my heart connection. Mehera and I didn't have that connection, but Mani and I did. Mani was the one whom I could always talk to about anything. She understood. And sometimes she understood without having anything said. In fact, the Amarjiti, before I got married, I was getting married in the May, she came up to me and she said, Mehera, if you don't want to get married, if you change your mind at the last minute, don't worry. I'll make sure nobody says anything to you. Even at the last minute, if you say, I don't want to get married, I will make sure nobody says anything to you. But don't do it unless you want to do it. But of course, it had to happen. Shahryar had to come into the world. He had to come into the world with these 2 parents. And so I did get married, and I had to have my spiritual training. Bhauji used to say this to me. He said, Mehera, you must join my spiritual training. I said, no, Bhauji, sorry. I have already been spiritually trained. And he said, I said, yes. You remember I was married to Kawas for 11 years? I said, compared to him, you are a pussycat. My spiritual training is complete. And he would laugh and say, okay. Yes?
Excuse me, what's the most memorable moment you remember of Baba that really inspired you to see him?
When he lay in the crypt. Until then, I played with him. I, entertained him, was entertained by him. So when he was in the crypt, that was my epiphany, I think. That's how I realized he was God.
You felt his presence when you were in the crypt?
You could feel his presence so strongly. So strongly. It was like a force pushing against you. You couldn't escape it. When Baba lay in the crypt, you couldn't escape his presence. He was everywhere. That was what, as an almost 10-year-old, struck me, is he's everywhere. If he's everywhere, in spite of the fact that people are saying he dropped his body, he must be God. But the most memorable thing about Baba for me was his scent. He had a unique smell that was like so Baba. And once in a while, we go into Baba's bedroom in Mehrazad for morning aarti, and there's a fleeting whiff of that fragrance. And I turn to the girls and say, it just smelled like Baba in here. And of course, sometimes when you go into Eruch's room, you get this little whiff of ammonia and you think Eruch was here a few minutes ago. Because towards the end, he had bladder problems, and so his room always smelled a bit of ammonia. But Baba's scent was so unique. There is no describing it. I've smelled sadras and things, and it's not there. But sometimes there is that fleeting fragrance, and you say, yes, that's how Baba smelled.
How is it?
I can't describe it.
Could you say that it would be similar to like when you go to someone's, like Muhammad's temple, or if you go to a mosque or something like that?
No. It came out of his skin. Because when you embraced Baba, you usually my face would be here. So you turned your nose into his cheek, and he had a unique fragrance. His body smelled different from anybody else's. There's no comparison and there's no description. But sometimes when you smell it, you think, that's what the smell was like. Yeah.
How did he communicate with you? Was he off the record?
No, never. He gave up the alphabet board long before. I'm not that old. I was born in 1959. So by that time, he'd given up the alphabet board. But usually, Eruch or Mani would be there interpreting. However, and my mother says the same thing, when you were in Baba's presence, you didn't need interpretation. More often than not, you got exactly what he was saying. You know, you really didn't need that translation from the gesture into words. Yeah.
You mentioned when you chatted with Baba and your personal experience, childhood experience with Baba, and then he brought his body and in the crypt, and that 7 days, you somehow experienced his divinity, that level of giving him a liver. I would like to ask, what about now?
I
Now
still,
that he has dropped his body, and of course,
but that never went away.
that never went.
But speaking of experiences, my uncle Eruch would always lament the fact that he had never had any experiences in the tomb. None. All these Westerners, Easterners, they would come and say, I felt Baba so strongly, or I even saw him in the tomb and he said this to me or that to me. And he would say, but I never have any experiences. So we were sitting at tea and somebody came in and had just narrated this very powerful experience that they had. And he said to me, do you have experiences in the Samadhi? I said, no, never. He said, you should try. For both of us, you go try. He said, go sit in the Samadhi for 45 minutes. Longest I could sit in the Samadhi for would be 10 minutes. Stretch it to 15 minutes, but 45 minutes? He said, no, sit in the Samadhi for 45 minutes, come back tomorrow and tell me if you have an experience. So I said, okay. I went and sat in the Samadhi for 45 minutes and nothing. Mosquitoes, yes. Experiences, no. So after 45 minutes, I got up, I came out, and I went back to my house and I thought, my God, 45 minutes I sat in there, nothing happened. So I go back to the trust office the following day, and he said to me immediately, did you go sit in the Samadhi? I said, yes, Eruch Mama, I went and sat in the Samadhi. Did you have an experience? I said, no. He said, see, you and I, either we are so good that we don't need any experiences, or we are so bad that Baba doesn't want to give us any. I said, you're partially correct. I said, one of us is so good that they don't need any experiences, and the other one is so bad that they'll never have one.
I remember Eruch said that once.
Yeah.
So nice to remember how.
Yes.
I thought he was kidding.
No, never had an experience.
You Eruch last week, but
No, he didn't have an experience. No. Baba didn't raise his head and look at him. Baba didn't do anything. He would clean Baba's body the 7 days that it was in the crypt. Nothing. No experience. But the Zoroastrian priest who came, he said Baba opened his eyes and smiled at him. Yeah.
when he passed.
Yeah. During the 7 days that he was in the tomb, people would come and they would say they saw Baba open his eyes, they saw Baba do this, they saw Baba do that. Never saw anything of the kind. Only that feeling that he was everywhere. But I think that is more something that he gives you a bit of knowledge rather than an experience. And it didn't happen, he didn't open his eyes and say, look, I'm still here. Yes.
Did Baba ever give you instructions like a placebo effect, like if you had some kind of ailment, like take 2 100 oil pills, whatever, or every night before you go to sleep? Or did you have anything where Baba gave you specific instructions for health or whatever?
No, he gave my parents lots of instructions about, this is how you take care of her and this is what you do. But I didn't have any direct order from him. They had orders for me, but I didn't have any direct orders from him. My sister did. After she recovered from her smallpox, Baba said she shouldn't have any fish for 3 years. He said for her full recovery, she shouldn't have any fish for 3 years, and she should be given this, because she had a little bit of a chesty cough all the time, she should be given glycodin terpvasaka, which was a sort of a patent cough medicine that people would take. So those were the 2 orders that Baba gave for her. But when I was born, I had an infection from the hospital, and apparently he said I should have, lamb mince, steamed balls, meatballs made out of lamb mince, and mashed potato for 3 months. So for 3 months, that's all I ate, mashed potato and meatballs. Yeah, it's true. I did. Not as a newborn. I had a weak stomach from the time that I was born because of this infection that I picked up in the hospital, and it wasn't going away. So he said for 3 months she should have mashed potato and meatballs, day in, day out, morning and afternoon. I could have breakfast, like toast and butter and things for breakfast. Speaking of breakfast, Baba's Vishnu Master used to come to Bindra house regularly around 6:30 in the morning. We were all early risers. The doorbell would ring and it would be Vishnu Master. And Vishnu Master had a great fondness for fresh cream. And at Bindra house table, every morning there would be a bowl of fresh cream, which was taken out from the milk the day before. And I too loved fresh cream, especially with a karak chapati, a chapati that has been roasted till it's brittle and crisp, and some sugar sprinkled on it. And as soon as I heard that bell, I would say to Gai Mama, Gaili, put the cream in the fridge. That old man will eat it all up. She would say, let him eat it. So I learned, as soon as the doorbell rang, I would put some into my plate immediately, so that if he finished it, it was okay. I'd had my share, Yeah. Vishnu Master loved his cream. And Donkin would come and he would smoke a chirut, and I was so terrified of Donkin because, yes, really, he had this deep voice and he'd say, Chirutwala, Chirutwala. And he would ring the doorbell, usually at night when it was dark, and all you would see was this glowing end of his cigar. And, for a small child, my little servant who was my companion, she would say, he'll catch you and take you away. And Donkin, it terrified me so much that I would hide whenever he came. And he knew that I was hiding, so he would deliberately walk around saying Chirutwala, loudly. But when Baba dropped his body, I realized that he was really a very nice person, because he would take us in his car to get the provisions to feed the people who were there. For the 7 days, they had to be fed. So food would come from Akbar Press, the provisions would go there, food would come cooked, because there was no cooking facility. Then Chagan Master and Padri and all organized a sort of kitchen. But, he was so humorous. He would be driving along and there were donkeys on the path in those days. And he would tootle his horn and say, hey, Donkin, get out of there.
But Chirutwala, he's referring to himself.
Of course. Yes. Yeah, he smoked a chirut. Yeah, he smoked a chirut. So it was Chirutwala. Anybody else have a question?
Did you have any connection with Secretary Adi Kerawalla?
Well, yes. He was Adi uncle. I got into trouble with him once. Very bad trouble with him, thanks to Jack Small and the likes. Yes. Well, once he was away. He had gone to Bombay or somewhere on a trip, and Jack Small had just learned a new dance. Jack Small loved to dance. And he had learned a new dance. And I think, I was about 14 or 15, and my sister was 3 years younger. So we were in Akbar Press for the holidays. And he said to us, why don't you come to the trust office in the evening? I have got this new music tape and I'm going to show you how to do a new dance. So we asked the family, they said, go walking, come back. Don't take too long, come back by 9:30. Okay. So off we went, and there was this music and this dancing, and he was swinging people in and out like that between his legs. It was some kind of jive that he was doing. And we really had a wonderful evening. But what I didn't know was that he hadn't invited Sheila Kalchuri. And she was quite close to Adike. So when he came back, she complained to him and she said, did you know that the Kerawalla girls came here and they drank beer and they ate wafers and they danced with all these American boys? So we get called to Adi's office. He called us in and he said, is this true? Did you do that? So, we didn't realize it was out of bounds. We said, yes. My sister never said anything. I said, yes, Adi uncle, we had come. He said, have you girls no shame? Coming in the night just like that when there are men around? Then I realized that was major gaffe. Of course, had she been invited, I'm sure there would have been no problem.
Say more.
Yes.
I'm just curious a little bit. Was it really mainly at Bindra House that you would see Meher Baba, or did you also go to Guru Prasad?
We saw Baba at Bindra House, but after, later on, he didn't come to Bindra House as often, but when he was in Guru Prasad, we would go almost every day. Sometimes we'd take our lunch with us, and Baba would invite us and say, sit at the table and eat with me. And on those occasions, sometimes if he had something in his plate, like a fig or something, he would throw it at you and you could catch it and have it. Other days, we would still take our meal with us, but we'd go and eat a picnic in the Bun Gardens or in the Guru Prasad guest house. But we saw a lot of him in Guru Prasad. We were in and out of there all the time.
So when you were growing up, he would go and spend basically the summer in Guru Prasad for like 3-4 months?
That's right, yeah. And so we would be preparing the house before he came, making up his bed. The bedding would stay in Bindra House. The Maharani's furniture was there, but his bedding was taken away and put away in Bindra House. And then when he was due to come, we would take everything and set it all up for Baba and the ladies and men Mandli to come and live there. And Khorshid, Mehra's cousin, she would come from Bombay to help out with that. So, but then once he was there, we were there as well. And sometimes more, sometimes less, depending. And on most weekends, he would call people from Bombay. The Bombay group would come, and sometimes other groups would come. And, that's how the Karachi group got the order for not eating chicken. Well, a lot of them did. They would stay in Mobo's hotel, which was just like a few buildings away from Guru Prasad was the Mobo Hotel, which is still there. And they had a very good cook who cooked chicken very well. So they would have chicken this and chicken that, and Baba would ask them every day after they came back after lunch. He would say, what did you eat? And it was always chicken something, Baba, chicken biryani, chicken curry, chicken this, chicken that. And one day, this is more to do with the Karachi group, they were all there, Adi Dubash and Rhoda and all of them, and also my in-laws were there. And he turned to them and he said, you're all eating a lot of chicken. From today, no more chicken. And so they said, okay, Baba. Now, my father-in-law, had he kept quiet, the children would have escaped. But he said, Baba, our children are in Karachi. Does the order apply to them? And of course, Baba thought about it and said, yes, they should also not eat chicken. So they all got lumbered with it. Meherwan Dubash can't eat chicken. My ex-husband and his brother, they don't eat chicken. A lot of the children don't eat chicken. Even up to today, they don't eat chicken. They eat duck and they eat turkey, but they don't eat chicken. Because he didn't say don't eat fowl, he only said don't eat chicken. So they can have duck and turkey and anything else that flies, but... Ji? Goose also. Yes, they can have goose. Anything that's not chicken, they can have. Yeah. Everybody says, oh, but Baba gave such and such an order about not eating aubergines or not eating tomatoes, so I also should not eat. Because they might find some little parallel between their physical ailments and that person's. It doesn't apply to you. That was their order. You can give up tomatoes or aubergines if you like. It's not going to do you the slightest bit of good because it didn't apply to you. They say, oh, so-and-so had an order from Baba and I'm also doing the same thing. And I say to them, but why? It was not your order. That was specific to that person. Baba didn't give orders that then suddenly became applicable to the world at large. They were only for that person who had the order at that time. Don't take on trouble. If he let you free, why do you want to unnecessarily shackle yourself with instructions that you don't have to obey?
So you
Yes.
mean it's okay to eat eggplant? Yes.
Yes.
So many Bible lovers who don't eat eggplant. If somebody had ordered.
Oh, right. Now that is such a waste. They wasted all those years not eating eggplant. Yeah. Of course they should eat eggplant. Yeah.
How do you spend your time now?
How do I? Oh, I've just finished editing Meherwan's memoirs. I help Falu with things to do around Meherazad estate, Also, my mom and dad are not in good health, so sometimes I have to go away and take care of them. I help out in the kitchen. I do whatever is given to me. Meherwan, knowing my basic nature, was not very work-orientated. He said, whatever work you're given, you have to take it as Baba's prasad and not say no. You have to do whatever is given to you without questioning why. So I am learning to do that. I'm learning to do it without questioning why. And I still carry on with my work as a counselor. I do it on Skype. So in the evenings after everything is over, I have certain slots every week that I talk to people from wherever they are, which is very helpful. It keeps my brain engaged. Otherwise I'd forget. I'm ready. Yes. I have 4 more minutes.
I had a question or two about Meherwan.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't really know him. I've heard about him. I've seen his photo, and I know that you're close to him. Now you published his memoirs.
No, not yet published. Rick Chapman is doing that. In time, they will come forth.
You're publishing his memoirs.
Yes.
So, a couple of things. One is he in good health, and is he in a condition that he might travel to this country in the future?
No. Even when he was in a condition when he could travel to this country, he wouldn't have come. Because when Baba took Eruch to look after him, he said to Meherwan, look after the family. And that's what Meherwan did. Until 2012, when Manu passed away, he was looking after the family. And in fact, when she died, it was such a big gap in his life. He had nobody to look after, and he wasn't used to looking after himself. And he went into quite a depression for a while. But now I spoke to him from John and Karina's place, and he was quite cheerful, wasn't he? And he's looking good, but he's not in very good health. He has very severe scoliosis, and he's in constant pain. And, he's not the kind of person who will do what needs to be done conscientiously.
And
so.
Is he very, very fluent in English?
His English is very fluent, but it is his English. So he speaks in a certain manner, and that's what we were struggling with, because Rick thought that the book was grammatically incorrect, and I said, no, don't change it. Unfortunately, Meherwan backed me up in that, because we would have lost the flavor of his voice. The flavor of his voice comes through in what he writes, because it wasn't something he wrote. It was tapes that were made of him and then transcribed, and then we went through the transcriptions and edited them. But, he's the most self-effacing person you would ever find. And Baba was once asked, he said, what does a saint look like? And he pointed to Meherwan and said, he looks like that. Yes, Baba said that about him. And Naja said, Eruch is Satan and he's the saint. Yeah. Thank you all for being so patient and listening.